Hello and welcome to another episode of Chasing Hope. You're with me, Catherine Abraham. Today we have a very interesting guest with us. His name is Pastor Sam. He is also the Associate Director of Communications at the global headquarters of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. He is one of the creators of Heroes 2, the Bible trivia game, which is slated to release in India later this year. He is a Brazilian, married to a lovely English woman, and a father of 3 amazing boys. Thank you so much for taking out the time, Pastor Sam, and we are absolutely delighted to have you here.
My pleasure, Catherine. Good to be here with you.
Thank you. Pastor, just a little bit about the Heroes 2 Bible trivia game. Could you tell us a little bit about this game and what brought about this entire thing?
Certainly. I was a local church pastor a few years ago, and I realized that young people don't really know what it means to be a disciple of Christ anymore. They kind of lost their identity, partially because of secularization, partially because the biblical stories, the stories from the Bible, are told in a very hygienic way. And, all the violence is taken out of them, all the blood, all of the intrigue and the conflict. And they were just telling these stories as if they are safe tales. And we wanted to create a game that young people would engage with in a way that would bring them back to those stories. So it's a trivia game because you need to know the stories in order to answer the questions. And it's focused on the Marvel style of heroes. The bold pose and the muscles and the strong lines and shadows and shades, within the drawing itself that pulls up the biblical heroes. So that was the thinking behind it. It's to bring a knowledge of these stories, these Bible stories, to a new generation.
Right. It's a very interesting point you make here, Pastor, because you just mentioned that how many of us have lost the actual essence of these Bible stories. And many of them, yes, in fact, are told in a way that it's very safe for young children. But don't you feel that the separation of violence from the stories also helps the children in some way or the other to lead better Christian lives?
No, I don't. If you create a safety situation where you take a child who is never exposed to suffering and to violence and to death, they have the view that society and that in general everything is just safe and wonderful and great, and they don't experience rejection. They have no idea what frustrations are. They don't know that amazing people that came before them had to deal with incredible setbacks. They had to deal with violence and so on. So what you have, and you see this in the West, Catherine, I think more than in India, but it's not unheard of for a 16-year-old boy to be rejected by a girl and then proceed to commit suicide or worse, try to do harm to the girl and others.
Oh, it's very common here too. Yes.
Is that right?
Common. Yes.
So it's why? Because they haven't dealt with frustrations. They don't understand just how much suffering life involves. And these biblical stories, they're rife with mistakes, with things that they did well, with things that they did badly. Because these heroes are not, the thing about the Bible is the Bible doesn't just present the good things about these guys.
Right.
They follow God, and the Bible presents how amazingly they follow God, how much justice they brought, how much righteousness they brought, how wonderful their families were. But the Bible very quickly also mentions how terrible they were. The same character, how much they lied, and how terrible the lying was, and the consequences of the lying. the
Right.
consequences of the mistakes. So you learn from what they did well, but you also learn from what they did very badly. That's the beauty of the biblical narrative. And if we just create a hygienic version, I'll give you an example. David and Goliath, right? David
Yes.
and Goliath. It's very difficult for you to understand Western thinking, right? If you're in India and you want to understand Christianity and you want to engage with the West, let's say you want to learn, the most famous thing India is famous for in the West probably is programming. If you want to learn programming and you want to work for a Western company, if you want to
Yes.
engage with Europe from a knowledge perspective or anything else, you have to know these biblical stories. David and Goliath is one of them. So, it's it is very common for even people in the West not to know it and be worse off for it. So Goliath is this giant, and the way the story is told to children is that David is a giant, and he is, and he's strong, and he has a helmet of metal, and he has a huge shield and a sword, and he's gonna fight anyone who comes near him, in a duel. And then there is David. David is a little boy, and he's only a kid, and he's so weak. But he has a a slingshot, and he takes 5 stones, and he goes against the giant, throws the stone, and God helps the stone to hit the forehead of the giant, and the giant dies. That's the hygienic version, right? Boys, when they hear that version, you know what they want to play? Everybody wants to be Goliath.
Right.
You see? Because Goliath is strong. Goliath is strong.
It's strong.
I don't want to be David. David is weak. And that's not how the story goes. The story is that David is a 16 to 18-year-old boy who is very strong. He has fought against a lion before and won. He has fought against a bear before and won. And when he comes to meet Goliath, he says to the king of Israel, Saul is his name, I'm going to fight this giant in the name of God, and I'm going with my weapon of choice, which is a slingshot. A slingshot was not a child's weapon, a little toy. It was a weapon. The stone would leave the slingshot with the same speed and intensity as a caliber 44 bullet. So it was a weapon. There was no doubt about it. And you could hit, if you were very good at it, you could hit anything at a long distance. So he hits the giant with that, but that's not what kills the giant. David ran to the giant, picked up his sword, and chopped his head off. That's the blood flowing. He chops the head off, picks up the head, and 2 days later, he's still next to the head of this wide-eyed Goliath. Why? Because that's exactly what happened. Now, when you tell this story, you need to analyze the morality of the story. You need to analyze everything that was happening behind the scenes. But I tell you one thing, all the boys, especially the young boys and teenagers, they are on it. Suddenly they're interested in the Bible again.
Right.
And these stories are very rich. They're very wealthy because we all meet our giants that we feel so small against. You meet a challenge that is bigger than you. And much bigger than you. And suddenly you can either cower into your little corner or you can face the giant with the best weapons you've got. And with the help of God, the giant will come down and you will succeed. That's why it matters.
And in many ways, actually, it resonates even with the Indian culture, which has always talked about the victory of good over evil. So I think the connection would be there even then.
Yeah.
So, Pastor, just moving on a little bit to the technicalities, what was the most challenging part in creating this game?
The artwork.
Okay.
That was the most challenging part. Creating the 3D aspects of it and modeling the characters. We don't have many game developers, as it turns out, who want to participate in a project like this. I mean, we don't have many game developers altogether in the world. There are 3.4 billion players, gamers.
Okay.
Which is like 1 in 2 people in the world. 1 in 3 people in the world are gamers. But we don't have many game developers. So every studio in the world has more positions open than they have people to fill them. And we need experts in C++ and Unreal Engine. If you know anybody like that, Catherine, send them our way because we need to grow our team, and we only have 2 of them, and we need to have more. So that's the engineering part. But the artwork part is also difficult. Drawing these heroes properly and doing the shading properly and doing the modeling, the animations, all of that takes a long time and it's very difficult. It took over 2 years to make this game.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And I'm sure all those who are listening to you right now, I'm sure many of them would be interested in joining your team, Pastor, and especially once they've probably had a look at the beautiful game that you've come up with. But my next question is slightly more personal. So you have multiple projects apart from this, and most of them, of course, relate to the direct spread of the word and the scripture. How do you find time for the creative side?
It's if you had any idea how many projects I have going, Catherine, you would that you would be truly amazed at what God can do. I've been reading a lot of, in the last few years, a lot of books, 2 books a week for 5 years now. And some of those books have really challenged me to try and do better. And one particular book was a book called 12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson, where he puts there the fact that meaning comes from taking responsibilities.
Right.
Meaning in life comes from taking responsibilities. And he puts out, take as much responsibility as you can. First, clean your room. Start with your room because everyone can do that. And then take care of yourself first. And then take care of your family. And then take care of the world. And in this progression, he goes, you don't know what you're capable of until you try. You have no idea how many projects you can do until you try. You have no idea how many podcasts you can work through until you try. Until you try your absolute best, you will not know exactly what your limit is. So we have about 340 freelancers that work with us from different countries. I think there are 17 countries that we manage that large group of people. You have various projects. I think we are at 18 or 19 projects like Heroes. And
wow.
It's absolutely crazy. One of our largest operations is a prayer campaign. If you go to the main Facebook page of the Seventh-day Adventist Church and you ask for prayer, we will be praying for you within 3 minutes. Another human being will connect with you within 3 minutes. We have a team of more than 100 people working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, praying. And since the pandemic started in March last year, we have prayed for 1.4 million prayer requests. Some people sent more than one. This is one of those projects that is very rewarding because, somebody's desperate, they don't know where to go, and then they write to the church.
Right.
And most of them are not Adventist, many of them are not Christian, but they need prayer, right? And who says no to prayer? One of the things that I loved in India is that I was taken to many different business people and many different authorities and so on. And it really didn't matter if they were Muslim or Hindu or if they had no religion at all. They always welcomed prayer.
Right.
Right? Prayer was something that Indians seem to know instinctively that it's very important. And
absolutely.
And so we focused on prayer a lot. We don't have enough funds to help people in terms of finances. We don't have enough hospitals. We have plenty of hospitals in India, but it's not enough to heal everybody.
Right.
And there is a cost associated with maintaining a hospital. But prayer we can offer. We can be part of people's lives as we pray. And God brings healing. God brings a freedom. And it's incredible how God does that. That's the miracle of the story. And we decided that we were going to be here to pray for others. Now, beyond these projects, I'm also pursuing a PhD with the University of Westminster. And a PhD is the hardest thing I've ever attempted in my life. So that takes a lot of my time too. And I don't know how I'm doing all of this, Catherine. I have absolutely no idea. I was talking to a friend this week, and I'm blown away by how much this, how much stuff we're able to produce. And I'm trying to find my limit. I'm trying to do what I can to find my limit. And I haven't found it yet, so I'm going to keep going.
Yes, let's hope that you don't find it too soon enough. So, Pastor, that's very interesting. But since you started off on the entire bit about you coming to India, I'd like to ask you. So, as you're very aware, in India, we have people from multiple faiths. Now, would this game be restricted to Christian children only or young people, or would an outsider also be able to play it quite safely without any problem?
No problem. I mean, you need to know the stories. So as you answer the questions, if you get a question wrong, the game tells you what the right question is. And you begin to get a picture of who these characters are. Who's Adam and Eve?
Right.
Who is Noah? Who's Moses? Who is, Daniel? All of these biblical characters. And if you don't know the stories, we have a lot of material that you can read, short, straightforward material that you can read to find out who these heroes are.
Yes, that was my next question. So how does one go about understanding who these characters are? Where do they, is it in the app itself, in the game itself, or do they need to follow another link to the stories?
It's in the game as you click to view the story, and it's also on the website, heroesbibletrivia.org. You can find it there as well.
Perfect. So, Pastor, this brings me to another question, which is quite pertinent, especially when it comes to gaming. As a parent yourself, you would actually connect with this because many parents today find games more of a distraction. Now, how would you counter this?
Well, games can be a distraction, and you need to be very careful how much time your children spend playing games. My children play games. They have a certain amount of time that they can play within. And when that time is up, That's it. Go do something else. The other thing I'll advise is for them to do what they need to do first and only then have access to games. That's what my parents did with me.
Right.
Perfect. When I would come back from school, I studied in Brazil when I was young because I'm Brazilian.
Right.
Up until 13, I was in Brazil, and then they sent me to England to a boarding school so that I could learn English and so on. So when I was still in Brazil, after coming back from school, in Brazil, we only study in the morning or in the afternoon. It's a very clever system. So basically the same building, the same school, and often the same teachers can teach 2 times the number of people that you have in a full day kind of system. So we went to school, started at before 7 a.m., ends at 12. So when I got back home, my dad would say, we're going to study for 2 hours today. Every day, it was like 2 hours.
Okay.
But here's the thing. If you learn it, you can go and play whatever it is that I set for us to learn. And then that was it, Catherine. And I was like, okay, so hold on a minute. If I learn this in half an hour, I can go play in half an hour? All right. Then I always learned whatever he had within half an hour. So that taught me to learn first, play later. For your listeners who are parents, if you follow that, you will teach the single most important skill for success, which is called delayed gratification. Delayed gratification. You do what you need to do first, and you do what you want to do later. That's the single most important thing that you can teach a child.
That's a wonderful answer. Pastor, this also, since you just mentioned about the languages, my question to you is that I did read that the game would also be available in Indian languages very soon. So how long after the game actually comes out? Would it be like a simultaneous release of multiple languages, or would it be primarily in English and then subsequently in different other languages?
We need help, Catherine. That's what we need. So if you have, some of your listeners may want to help, to translate it to Hindi, to Tamil, to all the other Indian languages. Yes, please. We need help. As soon as it is translated into those languages, we will release the game in those languages too.
Perfect. And is the world release date finalized, or is there currently a trial version available already?
Right now is a trial version. You can go and sign up to be a beta tester. There are a few things that are still not working properly in the game. Please report those and we'll fix it. Especially on Android. iOS is working quite well, but Android is very complicated. There are too many device types, and sometimes you have a bug that only happens in this device type that is created somewhere in Taiwan, and we don't have access to that device type. So we need people to test and tell us. But end of March is the release of the game.
Okay, and Pastor, could you just help us? Is this going to be a paid version of a game, or is it going to be free through and through?
Here's the exciting thing. It's free forever.
Okay,
And there are
great.
no ads.
Oh,
Okay? So it's
I'm
free
sure that comes as a relief.
and there are no ads. Yes. We're excited about that.
Okay. So finally, Pastor, thank you so much for everything. And my last question for the day is that since this podcast is all about chasing hope, what would your message to all the young people who have tuned in be?
People in India, in my experience, are very hopeful. They're very creative. They're very hopeful. It doesn't matter how dire the situation is. They don't panic. Usually they find a way forward. They find a way to live, to survive, to go, to navigate the circumstances that they find themselves in. My brother-in-law married a girl from Hosur near Bangalore. And so I think my first trip to India was their wedding. And then, if you've been to an Indian wedding, you know it's a special experience, right? It was wonderful. And I learned a lot just observing and just watching people and so on. And, you get Indians that get angry, but I didn't see much anxiety like you have in the West. And that's a wonderful thing because the biblical characters, they had hope that the world would be put back together. That's what I would say is the hopeful part of the game. Every story, the characters can continue and they can win and they can be victorious and they can be courageous and they can be strong because they know that God will put this world back together. And that we will find in this new world a more just, a fairer, a new wonderful society, which does not match the labels that we have today. Today right. you have labels like, a fair society is a socialist society where the rich can help the poor. And others say, no, it's a capitalist society because capitalism brought more people from poverty than any other system. And what you need is for people to wake up and to be productive. And you have these tensions and these labels. Well, the kingdom of God does not operate within these labels. God is the King of Kings who will put everything back together. And it is because of our love for God that we will live like Jesus lived. And Jesus modeled what love and compassion should look like in his life here. And it wasn't that, the wealthy would be treated differently. The whole point is that the wealthy will be treated exactly the same because in his kingdom, every human has the same value. This is a very Christian foundational belief that we are created in the image of God. And, if you're created in the image of God, then everything changes. It doesn't really matter how many degrees you have, how much production you make, what your performance is. We all have the same value to God. So if you have someone who is disabled, right. Some of your listeners may have a disabled child, for example. And to God, your child with disability has the same value as the president of a nation who achieved so much in their lives. It doesn't matter. We all have the same value to God, and we all look at each other in this way because we were created in the image of God. And to me, that's just so beautiful.
Thank you for this wonderful conversation, Pastor Sam. I must say that it has been deeply insightful just hearing you. And I'm sure that all our listeners tuning in will be more than happy to try out this particular game, that is the Bible Heroes 2, the trivia. And I'm sure that your team and you, the work that you're doing is just going to keep spreading God's word in multiple ways across boundaries, across nations. Thank you so much for your time. I'm sure everything would be absolutely, since you've been so inspiring yourself in these 30 minutes, I'm sure the game itself is going to be a game changer for people who are trying it out. So thank you so much, and we wish you all the very best, you, your team, and I'm sure these tiny glitches which are there will also fade away soon. So I'm rather excited to try the game myself, and I will very, very soon. Thank you so much. And to all our listeners tuning in, thank you very much for tuning in to Chasing Hope. And I hope that this particular episode has brought you some deeper insights, not just on the Bible Heroes 2 trivia game, but also on the deep foundational Christian principles that we've been trying to share with you. So if you have any questions, if you have any prayer requests, please send it to us. We're available on www.chasinghopewithcatherine.com. And if you do want to participate as a game tester, as somebody who would like to get into game developing, please also drop us an email and we'll make sure that we connect you to Pastor Sam. Thank you once again, Pastor Sam, and thank you to all our listeners.